Do recognize that the time is 2:01. However, we are going to wait a few more moments for Mr. Livingston to arrive so that we make sure that we have a quorum for this meeting. afternoon, everyone. We're going to call our coronavirus ad hoc committee meeting to order. And Ms. Only, if you will, please call for the roll.
McBride, Livingston. Here. Joe Walker, Barron.
Here.
Newton. We have a quorum.
And I also would like to acknowledge that Ms. McBride is not feeling well and she will not be joining us today. Our next order of business on our agenda is the approval of the minutes from October the 20th. Those minutes can be found on pages 2 through 7.
Move to approve.
Second.
Any discussion? Anything we need to add or delete? Any changes? Not Ms. Only?
Livingston.
Here.
Barron.
Yes.
Newton.
Yes.
Yes. Motion passes.
Next order of business is the adoption of our agenda. Mr. Brown, do we have any changes or anything you'd like to add or delete?
There are no requested changes.
If not, Ms. Only. So
moved, Madam Chair.
Second.
Ms. Only, please call the roll.
Livingston.
Here.
Barron.
Here. Yes.
Newton. I'm here and yes. Motion passes.
Thank you, Mr. Livingston, for throwing all of us off.
All right. Well, I was really thrown off. I had 3 o'clock on my agenda, so I'm the one that's thrown off.
Well, welcome. So these items that are before us today are items that we did have discussion about last week, and for the sake of the body, we would like to have this discussion further today as well, because there are some items that need to move forward to full council on tonight. And so, Mr. Brown, if you would please begin with the mental health check-in program.
Yes, ma'am, I sure will. And again, we also have Chief Polis here as well, who may have some additional comments related to this item. But specifically, if you look at page 9 of your packet, I believe it will give you a good summation of what is being asked. I'm starting at about the second paragraph from the bottom. One of it says, one of the benefits of our sheriff being the National Sheriff of the Year and on the board of the Major County Sheriff's Association is that he has an inside view of proposed legislation at the federal level related to police reform. He believes federal legislation is forthcoming, and in an effort to be on the forefront of health and wellness for our deputies, he would like to proactively implement this new annual program that we refer to as the Mental Health Check-In Program. The cost of this program is $16,250 annually, and then from that, we look to utilize the American Rescue Plan dollars to cover for the first number of years here, as you can see, through 2026. Which would basically be asking for this committee to approve the utilization of $81,250 in total of American Rescue Plan funds to support this program. Then after 2026, then it would be a different pot of funds that would be required to address this annual program. But that's why we before this committee requesting on behalf of the Richland County Sheriff's Department the implementation of the mental health check-in program. And if there are any additional questions, again, we do have Chief Polis here to speak to this item.
Questions?
I certainly support this, but I just want to caution us, that we be careful with American Rescue funds and not get into a habit of using these funds for recurring costs. I think that can get us in trouble in the long term. This is a small amount, but I just want to point that out for future reference.
Thank you, Mr. Livingston. I think that is something that this entire committee does share the sentiments, and I've shared with Administrator Brown that we do want to start to prioritize our funding based upon the categories that we've already set forth to the U.S. Treasury to ensure that we get some of those things that the citizens said that we need in Richland County, that we start to address those types of programming. So I certainly agree with you. Ms. Newton?
If I may add to the chorus of agreement for this, just to say that what I would love to see us do as a body is us come and bring those suggestions, because if, even with what you just said, if we let every request that falls under those categories land on our desk, I mean, there's not enough money in the world that would meet all of those needs, and I want to make sure that we're, you know, as you're saying, Ms. Barron, operating more strategically. So I guess what I would hope is that we can have those conversations, and that we can present something perhaps a little more, I don't want to say formal, but as you and I were discussing, that we can just clarify what the process is for getting things on the agenda, because I would like to see it happen a little differently. That is quite apart from me supporting this, which I do, but just we're also setting precedent with the things that we're doing. Thank you.
I say, Madam Chair, I move for approval.
Second?
Is there any further discussion about this item? If not, Ms. Only, please call for the vote.
Livingston,
Yes.
Barron,
Yes.
Newton.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you so much. Mr. Brown, we'll move on to item 5 on our agenda, which is the COVID-19 Small Business Relief Grant Program, which is found at page 13 through 36.
Yes, ma'am. And as I address this item, I do want to provide some clarity, because we've been talking about the last few conversations with this committee, we talked about American Rescue Plan dollars. So I wanted to take a brief moment and communicate that we are now moving to a different conversation related to funding. It is not American Relief Plan dollars that we're talking about. We're talking about Community Development Block Grant Program dollars specifically allocated to coronavirus response. So early on in the pandemic, Richland County, like many other jurisdictions, were able to receive a allotment of CDBG CV, that's Community Development Block Grant dollars specific to coronavirus relief, and take a portion of those specified funds to apply to dealing with the pandemic. And so those are the pot of dollars we're talking about now. So I'm going to ask you to turn your attention to page 13 of your agenda packet. And for the benefit of those who are maybe on the call listening in, who are not able to look at this packet, I'm going to do just a brief amount of reading. It says, through the CDBG CV program, again, that's Community Development Block Grant Coronavirus Program, HUD, which is the Housing and Urban Development, provides grants to states, insular areas, and local governments to prevent, prepare for, and respond to the spread of COVID-19. At least 70% of every grant must be expended for activities that benefit low to moderate income persons by providing housing, a permanent job, a public service, or access to new or significantly improved infrastructure. The remaining 10% may be used to eliminate slum or blighted conditions, or to address an urgent need for which the grantee certifies it has no other funding. Eligible uses are listed in the attached quick guide. So if in the back of your package you saw all those documents back there, that's the quick guide. And it provides you with eligible activities to support coronavirus and other infectious disease response. Going on to the second paragraph, it says the county's fiscal year 2021 CDBG-CV budget totals $2,197,908, of which $300,000 was allocated to economic development grants to small businesses to provide pandemic relief. This item was actually previously approved in county council back in July. So what we're asking you to do now is not to reapprove something that has already been done, but because we did a huge pot and we just submitted a general report, we did not specify that we would utilize the program in this way. We just talked about putting money in for economic relief. So what we're doing right now is we are asking the committee to allow us to utilize those funds in this particular way. And that particular way is going to be listed on page 14 of your packet toward the bottom. Community Development requested the Office of Small Business Assistance in designing and administering this grant program to help direct CDBG CV funds to low to moderate income persons in Richland County in compliance with HUD guidelines and deadlines. Both Community Development and Office of Small Business are excited to offer a grant program that will help small business community recover from from the pandemic's economic impact and preserve employment opportunities. Through this proposed grant program, Richland County will be investing a total of $300,000 in CDBG CV funds to help sustain at least 20 small businesses in Richland County over the next year. If you recall from our previous discussion, the idea is that businesses would be able to get up to $15,000 in eligible expenses from this program. So that's why it says at least 20 small businesses, because the idea there is if each business qualifies for that amount, you could help at least 20 at $15,000, but it certainly could be a different denomination in terms of the amount. But that is the request that we are asking this committee to approve. And the previous question that was asked was about timing. At the top of page 14, under regulatory compliance, HUD requires local government grantees to draw down 80% of their awarded funding by the end of the third year. Because the county submitted the drawdown request late in terms of the timing and amended the request in 2020, we are already in program year 2, which is federal fiscal year 2021. So the time component of that does come into play because we need to access these funds because it's kind of use it or lose it.
Heard from Mr. Brown. Are there any discussion or any questions for him? Ms. Newton.
Right, Mr. Brown, I'm sorry, go ahead. Mr. Brown, right now, we're just talking about 300,000 of the 2.1 million?
Right, so right now, technically, between the two programs that we're going to talk to you about today, we only have $800,000, of which $300,000 was already approved for economic relief, and $500,000 was approved for nonprofit.
Right, in the past.
So that other pot, there's not another pot there. Those funds that we're talking about was just to remind you that was an overall approval, and we submitted a plan to HUD that spoke to how we were going to use those funds. And if I can take you back just a little bit in time, the other funding that was utilized from that pot did both deal with economic recovery and public nonprofits. The county had its own program that it utilized, and those you could reimburse the county's general fund dollars for those usages that we did before. You took your own money and put into those programs. So you did that. But these remaining funds are what we have not utilized at this point.
Livingston addressed my question. Thank you.
So, Mr. Brown, what's before us solely today is just the $300,000 and not the nonprofit portion.
Not in this particular item right now.
Correct. And that is, I assume that will come before this body at another time.
That's another item on this agenda.
Okay, on this agenda. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
But right now, I'm asking specifically, we broke it out because we're trying to do a good job of keeping things separate so that you can address them and it can be clearer for everybody involved.
I move approve item 5.
Second?
Any further discussion? If not, Ms. Only, please call the roll.
Livingston. Barron.
Yes.
Newton. Motion passes.
So to item number 6, Mr. Brown, which is the CDBG CV Public Service Grants on page 37 through 44.
Yes, ma'am. So one thing that COVID-19 did was it gave us a lot of new acronyms. I do want to remind everybody again who maybe just joined the call or just got on the meeting, while this group has dealt largely with American Rescue Plan dollars, again, that is not what we're talking about now. We are talking about a pot of funds that the county received through HUD as a function of the Community Development Block Grant CV program, which is Coronavirus Relief Funds. And we submitted a plan that was approved by County Council back in July in total. And now what we're doing is coming back to County Council and saying, what we didn't do at the time, we just didn't, it was kind of going, we're learning. We did not get program specific. We were broad in our descriptions. This is very similar to what we just dealt with in a previous item, but it's specific to public nonprofits. So what we're asking is going to be on page 38, and I'm going to do this again for the benefit of those who may not have the packet in front of them. As a grantee of funds from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, Richland County received $500,000 in CDBG CV funds to prevent, prepare for, and respond to the coronavirus and meet our community's immediate needs. The Richland County Community Development Office will request proposals from local nonprofit organizations and government entities to reimburse for, as well as carry out public services in the county through the Community Development Block Grant CARES program, which is again known as CDBG-CV. This funding supports the activities in the unincorporated areas of Richland County or activities serving residents of the unincorporated areas of Richland County. Federal law requires that these grant funds primarily benefit low and moderate income persons, 80% of area median income or below, and then these grantees must have us, as the grantees receive of CDBG funds, must have policies and procedures in place to prevent duplication of benefits with Stafford Act and other CARES Act programs. This means that grantees may not use CDBG CV funds for costs already fully covered by other programs. CDBG-C funds may only be used for those public service activities that are new or that represent a quantifiable increase above the level of an existing service before March 1st, 2020. Funding is for reimbursable expenses incurred March 1, 2020 through the present, as well as future reimbursable expenses. There's a 25% match requirement of either cash or in-kind contributions or both. The match must be secured prior to award. So that what that means is that if a person does not have cash, in kind is the equivalent of basically work that is performed that would be the equivalent of the amount of cash. Okay? So I want to say that because people might say, oh, they said I don't have cash, so now I can't get the award, I can't participate. That's not what it's saying. Regulations allow the use of grant funds for a wide range of public services to prevent, prepare for, and respond to the coronavirus, meeting our community's immediate needs. And use of grant funds include, but are not limited to, the items that I show you listed on page 38 and 39. And I'll just read just a couple of them, but I don't want to go through the entire list, but I want to give you some indication of what these funds can be used for. Employment services like job training, crime prevention and public safety, child care, health services, fair housing counseling, education programs for services for senior citizens or homeless persons, those types of things. You're going to have, if the committee approves this and the council approves it, organizations will be able to then apply for these funds, and at that time, that's when a particular awardee would be selected. Right now, there's no group that we're putting before you asking you to approve. This is approving the program to allow those entities to request funding from this particular pot of money. So that is the request of staff, and we're asking the committee to approve this item and ultimately county council.
Before I open it up to my colleagues, I do want to ask, the term that you're using, individual, I noticed that you use individual and then you also say organization. When you speak about an individual, you're talking about someone who's actually receiving services from the nonprofit that we award? Is that what we're doing?
Right, so you would not, and I have somebody else to help, but yes, you basically could not have an individual go to someone who has received these funds from us and it'd be a duplication of benefits, so that who we provide this to, they would have to ensure that if Leonardo Brown went to them and said, I have a need for some housing services, that I had not had that need met by a program that would consider these funds duplicate funds. So that person would not be able to receive that benefit twice from that similar pot of funds.
That I understand, but you spelled out, in the document, it spells out the criteria of individuals meeting low to moderate incomes, and and of that nature. So that person, those qualifications do not belong to the nonprofit that is applying, but it belongs to the applicant
Correct.
that is applying.
Right, correct. But it's
Okay.
important that the nonprofit make sure that they do not expend the funds in a way that creates duplication of benefits.
Okay, which now is clear, because
Right.
how some way the waters got a little muddied in the presentation of it, and so it does make sense that the organizations that we would fund would be servicing a particular demographic of individuals meeting certain criteria.
I think it could get a little muddy, but if you had a nonprofit, because the nonprofit can also be a beneficiary of these funds. They don't have to be a pass-through for an individual. The nonprofit, as you see here, it talked about funding is for reimbursable expenses incurred. So they may have expenses that they incurred that they may want to get funds from, so they could not have gotten funding to do that already, and then come back again and get funding from us as well. So that could happen.
Okay, so I don't want to belabor the point. I definitely want to hear from my colleagues. So if a nonprofit is applying on their behalf to receive these funds, then this would be supplementing something that they did not get during this period of time. And those funds would just be for that organization to continue to do the good work that they've already been doing. However, they could possibly apply for these funds to get it back into the community, to a particular criteria of people.
That's correct. My understanding is both of those things could apply.
I'm clear. Thank you. That's a little near and dear to my heart, so I wanted to make sure when I started talking about it, I knew what I was talking about. Mr.
One
Livingston?
question. If we approve this, Mr. Brown, how much is left out of that 2.1 million or so?
Right, so Mr. Livingston, the answer to your question is, this pot of funds that you would approve today would basically, for all intents and purposes, I would say eliminate, but really these monies were a part of the funding that was set aside. So right now, we just haven't spent these funds. But that $2.197 million was already accounted for in the plan. So there is going to be no more funding from the $2.197 million associated, sir.
Ms. Newton?
Thank you. Brown, two questions. The first question is a bit in the weeds, but would applicants for these monies follow our usual Zoom grants procedures that we've set up for other grants?
I believe so, but let me get the experts in on that. So if I have either Ms. Sarah, if you're on, that wants to speak to that, or you're local, perfect. She's in the building.
Good afternoon.
Push the button in front of you.
Learn something new every day. Good afternoon. So this year, we are utilizing a software that is similar to Zoom Grants, but it is actually called Neighborly. The reason for the change to that is because Zoom Grants was an online application process, but it stopped there, whereas this software allows us to take the approved applications and transfer that into their actual portal, so they'll be able to enter in their draw request, their demographics, and all of the items that we report back to HUD, so it's kind of an all-encompassing software rather than just an application.
Thank you, and if I may reword my question based on that, but so there, with the Zoom grants process that I'm more familiar with, there is a certain vetting procedure, et cetera, and that's really what I'm getting to. Whichever software we use, are we still going to be following similar procedures on that front?
Yes, we are. There will be a mandatory pre-application workshop in order to educate the nonprofits on what the requirements are. So we go ahead and post program guidelines as well as what the scoring rubric will be ahead of time, and they are thoroughly vetted. We use a formal application process, which is suggested by HUD as the best way to receive these applications.
Thank you. And then, Mr. Brown, my second question, just to confirm what I heard, is that from an approval process perspective, once these applicants apply, you're envisioning that it comes back to council for approval, or is there a different committee and approval process?
Yeah, I don't necessarily think we thought it would be coming back to council.
That's fine, I want to clarify.
As a part of the process, because, I mean, I don't know, and maybe I should ask Ms. Sarah while she's there, if there is an intermediary between the eligible applicants that apply and then a separate approval. Are there any requirements that we have that you would be aware of where it would be appropriate or not to have applicants that are eligible to go through a second kind of, prioritization or some sort of additional screening?
May I interject real quickly?
Okay.
I'm not trying to add an extra layer of
No,
bureaucracy. I'm just trying to understand
Sure.
how this works.
Yes, ma'am. So once applications are submitted, they go through a threshold review, which is just to make sure that they included all of the required documents and information that we requested. Once they make it past that level, they go in front of a committee that takes the scoring rubric that, again, was provided to the nonprofit ahead of time. And at that point, applications will be scored based on different weights.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And is it a first come, first serve?
So there's a certain window of time that the applications are open, and then at that point, it depends on the strength of their program, the amount of funding that they're requesting, and at that point, the committee will make the decision on who to fund and who gets what amount.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
So just before you rush off, I'm a grants person, so I just want to see here. So there's a scoring rubric that will be used, and is there a threshold at some point where the applicants will not be considered for funding?
No. The total amount is $500,000, so we will see who applies, how much is requested. It may happen that we don't get enough applications the first round to meet that $500,000. It may be that we get more applications that exceed the $500,000, and at that point, that's when we'll go based on scoring and the amount of funding. So they may request an amount and not get the entire amount. We try to allocate that across as many organizations as possible.
And I may have missed this, is there a cap for what an applicant can apply for?
There is no cap on what they can apply for. They're informed of what the total pot of money is, and then asked to create their program and let us know what their needs are. So again, they may ask for a certain amount, and depending on how many applications, we may not be able to do that full amount, but are typically able to do at least a portion of that.
My last question, I'm serious. My last question is, the panel of individuals who are scoring these grants, or you said they come before a panel, who is on this panel?
It is made up of different Richland County employees, and we are also looking at this time to incorporate some individuals from the public that would not be eligible to apply for these funds. So some financial institutions, some realtors, just to sort of get some different perspectives involved in the selection.
Great. I'm happy to hear that, whereas I love Richland County employees. I think it does bring a balance to our application process to hear from someone else who is not internal, but someone who's in the community that can lend a different expertise. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Is there any further discussion, Ms.?
Madam Chair, I move for approval.
Second.
Moved and properly second. Any further discussion? Ms. Only, if you will, please call for the vote.
Livingston,
Yes.
Barron,
Yes.
Newton. Motion passes.
Thank you. And, that's our last item, Mr. Brown?
There's
Our
our
last-
last item.
Our last item. If not,
Madam Chair, I move for adjournment.
Second.
Ms. Only?
Livingston,
Yes.
Barron,
Yes.
Newton. Motion passes.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.